All right, everybody, welcome to the Christian Hardcore and Metal Community panel. I have assembled a team of specialists, influencers, and leaders in the Christian Hardcore and Metal community. These are some people who I've watched from a distance over the past few years, almost decade for some, and these people are the real deal. And so we're just going to have an open and honest discussion talking about faith and music. And, the point of this is that we can have a discussion and let it be something that other people can see and then also just learn from one another. So as far as the format for this, I'm going to be a host, but also participant. We got some music questions, some spiritual questions, and the point is just for us to have a conversation, and you guys can feel free to join in afterwards as well. So anybody's going to speak up at any point. Obviously, we're going to be respectful of one another, and if people are talking, to listen. And we might not listen or say something for every question or have to answer, but we're just going to have a big conversation. So I'll introduce everybody. So starting with Ryan. Ryan is the creator and founder of the God's Love for Hardcore Christian heavy music promotion page. He's also a photographer and a blog writer. Andres is the sole member of a Christian studio metal band called The Saving. He's a vocalist, guitarist, and he's an active drummer at his church. And then Dustin is the creator of the Christian Deathcore music page. He's a graphic designer, and he's also the member, one of the members of Straight from the Grave. So I thought we'd start this one off with, what is the best live band that you've ever seen? Dustin, you want to start us off?
Oh boy. That's a tough question. I've seen a lot of bands. I think one that really stuck out was actually a smaller band. It was kind of like one of the first really good shows I saw that kind of just surprised me. It was at Cornerstone 2012. It was Blood of the Martyr, surprisingly enough. They put on a really good show live. They're going out, running around out of the tent, throwing the guitars 30 feet in the air, and it was just different. I haven't seen that in a while. I mean, obviously I'd like to Chariot, Norma Jean, but just having such a small band that weren't that very known in 2012, that was one of the most surprising live shows I've seen that I remember still.
Andres?
Probably because it's fresh in my mind. I think Story of the Year. I remember seeing them in Warped Tour 2003. 2003, holy crap. That was my first Warped Tour. 13 years old. And I was at the front waiting for the starting line, because if you don't say it like you mean it, you're not really a person, or whatever. So I was at the front waiting for the starting line, and Story of the Year was opening the other main stage for Warped Tour, and I'm literally just seeing windmill kicks. That's all I'm seeing, because I can't see the drummer. I'm at an angle, and all I'm seeing is kicks. It's what is this band that's just doing judo kicks in the middle of a set? And it was amazing. And I mean, they're probably they're probably the only band that does hardcore and Cirque du Soleil at the same time. But yeah, so I think I would say them, but I only saw them once. So
Yeah, they have a really intense live show. Can't remember the context of where I saw them or what, but I think one of the guitarists was doing backflips with the guitar on and stuff. That's next level. That's a whole different thing.
I wonder what their practices look like. Sure. All right, we're just gonna take the next 30 minutes to just practice our somersaults, But,
yeah, I remember being in a high school band, and we would spend more time doing guitar swings than we would playing songs. So I guess we did it in the reverse, right? They were so good at music that they did that. We weren't any good at music. We just wanted to do guitar swings.
Yeah.
Ryan?
Yeah. Oh man. It's kind of hard to pinpoint one band, and it's kind of how do I rate the best? Because I mean, you got so much that you could look at. I mean, stage presence, performance. getting the energy of the crowd up, getting them involved. I'd probably say there was a tour with Impending Doom, Veil of Maya, probably like 8 years ago that came through here, Central Florida. Really impressed in Veil of Maya. I think that was the only time I've seen them. Impending Doom, I've seen many times. I just love their live shows. They're just so heavy live, and the crowds are always just nuts. I think probably the most kind of like I wasn't expecting it would probably be like Invent Animate before they got a new vocalist. Just a couple years ago I saw them, and then Within the Ruins was really good. So I'd probably say those would be my top bands I've seen live.
I think the thing for me thinking about someone's live show, I think about bands that just, you watch bands that have been doing it for 10, 15 years and you saw some of their early shows, you go back and watch stuff and they're just going nuts. And then, 10, 15 years later, they're kind of mellow. They're not really moving that much, but somehow the live show still carries. And I think part of that for me, when I saw my favorite metal band is Killswitch Engage, and when I saw them live, it was like, man, I love them. But like when I really look back and think about their live show, it was kind of lame, but I just love the songs so much that it felt like they were doing so much. So I think for me, one of the best live shows I've ever seen, and maybe just because it was so different from anything I've ever seen, was Sleeping Giant. It was I couldn't even tell you. So Tommy Green was on vocals, and his band had hung it up at that point. Everybody else was just I guess like just for writing or recording only. And I'd never been at a show that was like that the atmosphere had changed so much. And I think Gideon always puts on a killer show. I've seen all sorts of bands that are great live, but that's the one that has stuck with me over the years.
I want to change my answer. I just remembered. So this won't be any surprise, but I want to elaborate on it.
Yeah.
Probably the best band that I've seen is Code Orange. And Code Orange is Code Orange, right? Like they're taking a sledgehammer to your face all the time. But we saw Code Orange open for Deftones. And the amphitheater that we saw them at completely forbid any kind of moshing whatsoever. So it was like watching a play. Like everybody was like sitting down. But dude, Code Orange like came out swinging. Like to them, nothing changed.
Yeah.
They were still putting on. Yeah. And so it was like, I remember my wife, I got my wife into the Deftones, and so we went. And she had kind of heard Code Orange. She's like, that's brutal, man. I'm not into that. But she saw them, and I expected her to be like terrified and be like, this is garbage. I looked, and she was entranced with Code Orange. And after that, she could not stop listening to their album for like 2 or 3 weeks straight. And now she like follows them all the time, and which is weird. My wife's like an indie folk kind of person. But she was just so like, wow, this band is like actually excited about what they're playing, And Deftones is the freaking Deftones. Like they still play like they're 20 years old. So, I mean, they played. We saw them open for Rise Against, not open, but like they didn't headline Rise Against. Headline. And Thrice also opened that show, and dude, Deftones like cleaned Rise Against clock, bro. Like Rise Against was so boring. And Deftones, it was like their first tour. It was amazing. So anyway, okay.
Yeah, it's tough for bands to keep that energy up. You can fake it a lot with lights, with killer sound, cranking the amps up or whatever. But there's something about a band that, and Code Orange is a good example, that just doesn't lose their fire. Many years into their career, they're able to play that show like it's their first show. Just the energy and the hype. So kind of switching to something a little different. So thinking about, trends in modern metal, thinking about 6-string guitar, 7-string guitars, 8-string guitars. I think I've heard of a 9-string. How low is low enough? I'll just leave it there. Anybody can take it. Pick it up.
It really depends, man. In my opinion, it depends on. So, for example, like I'm sure you all know the band Issues. I don't think that that guy plays a 6-string. I believe he plays a 7-string. And Issues could hardly be called a death metal band. You know what I mean? And so it's like, what are you doing with it? You know what I mean? If you're only staying, you know, down here, and I'm trying to block like the mess that I have in my office, but if you're only staying at 0-1, I mean, you could use a 6-string and just use like a pitch modulator or something. It doesn't matter, which is actually what I did for the last album on the bass. Like instead of finding a that was the drop A, I just used the A string and we dropped it down a pitch.
Yeah.
And it sounded great, but it's like, what are you doing with it? You know what I mean? Like if you listen to like Black Tongue, like they're not really doing much besides like, you know, if they go past the 5th fret, it's only to do like the super high, like scary sounds, but they're not doing anything crazy. So it depends on like, if you're using the 8 strings to just do like dun 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 to make your chugs nastier. Some people like that. I think that it's like variety is the spice of life, man.
What tuning was the saving in?
The first album and the second album was in C. The third, there's 3 albums. There's 3 albums. 2.5 technically.
I'll allow it.
Yeah. There's 2.5. So the first one's an EP, but the last album. So the first 2 were in C, and then the last album, half of it was in drop A because it was supposed to be dark, and then the second half was back to drop C, and the middle was post Tenebras Lux, which means after Darkness Light, which makes sense because you go from drop A to drop C. So playing drop A was fun, dude. That's very fun. I can see why people like playing a drop A. It's just so like gnarly and chuggy, but at the end of the day, it's like, what are you doing with it? You know? So,
Ryan, do you think you have to tune low to be heavy?
No. I mean, the more you get into like more extreme genres of metal, you can see like it's not all just low tuning. But me as a consumer, my preference is like if it's low, man, it's gonna draw me in.
like 7-string, 8-string. Is there anything you've heard that you're like, no, that's excessive, or do you just, as long as it's in context, it's not, if it's good in context?
Yeah, so I mean, it depends on where the music's going with it. So I mean, just like Andres was saying, like, what are you doing with it? Like you got bands like now Josh with Travis is in the Mirror, and you know he's dialed down on his playing styles. He doesn't use the full effect of what his guitar can do. So I mean, again, like, what are you doing with it? Is it just for the shows and just for like the awe, the shock and awe? Like this dude's got 7-8 strings on his guitar, or so. But as far as the tuning, nah, you don't need tuning to be heavy.
Dustin?
Yeah, if you can be good with what you have, that's what really matters. I agree with like Andre. Like it depends a lot on what you do. Now, some of it does sound. Some of it can be really good lower, like Meshuggah. Like it's all based off groove and rhythm, and it's something different to where, sometimes I prefer that versus something technical. But then again, I enjoy the technicality where people have beautiful rhythm and are using the entire guitar, and so really depends in context. And when it comes to like heavy, like I mean, I've heard some like, for example, Periphery songs that feel heavier than people using 8-string guitars, and they're in like drop C. Like it's really how you use it and what the music is, what you're creating, and so it's all about how you use it. But I mean, I think we need to get 9 strings into the.
So I'm This Divided World plays in drop A, which is just, at the time I started This Divided World was the lowest thing I could imagine. It's like doing drop Z because there was nothing beyond Z, and then I found out someone was in drop G sharp and G and lower. So I'm all for whatever tuning works. Just for myself, it's consistency. So like I like to know I'm in drop A, even though I like the idea of going to different tunings. But one of the things that I notice is there's actually a huge tonal difference if there's like tension on your strings and they're tighter, or if it's looser and there's just like, I think I actually, when I was playing live in bands a few years back, I actually really grew to like the sound of like just kids that were they had the wrong size strings. They just wanted to go to some stupid low tuning, and they had these thin strings that are supposed to be tuned to standard, and they had them like chugged low. And now I listen to it and I think, they don't have the right size strings or whatever. But I remember back to, I used to love that kind of a sound. So I don't know. I guess I'm saying is I have an affinity for metalcore in C, but I also love the brutal heavy kind of stuff.
It depends on what you like, because I mean, just this morning we played a song where I was doing a high riff, but I was doing it lower on the fretboard, and I was like, I just don't like the tinniness of it. I want it to be a little bit glassier, and so I just did the same thing but higher on the fretboard.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, like it's the same notes, it's the same pitch, but I'm getting a different tone. If I go higher on the fretboard on different strings. And I was like, yeah, that's what I wanted to hear. Other people might be happy with that, and that's fine. But for me, I'm like, that's the glassy tone instead of the tinny tone that I wanted to hear,
Sure. So I'm going to shift directions, and this might open it up, turn it sideways, who knows. I'll start this one with Ryan. Christian band or Christians in a band?
Christians in a band. But I mean, you got to work like the nuance out of all that kind of phrasing and stuff. So it's like Christians in a band. So then what is like the outcome of your music? So is it just Christians in a band just to make music, or is that gonna, since you are Christians, and that's going to dominate your thinking and what you do in life? So is that going to come out in the message? Like, is the gospel going to be coming out in the message and what? But as far as like, I don't understand the whole conversation argument, like Christian band?
Yeah, Christian band or Christians in a band.
Yeah, it's just like, so you can make some kind of music or some kind of band just as like Christian, inherently Christian. So yeah, I don't know. But yeah, to me, I'd just be like, it's Christians in a band, and this is how our music, or this is how it comes out in our music.
Dustin?
I'd say it depends on who your target audience is. I know there's a lot of worship bands out there that are really targeting Christians specifically. And so, I mean, they might consider themselves more of a Christian band, and I think that's fine. But then again, there are those bands that are really trying to go deep into the scene, trying to reach the lost. And they might have a better chance at reaching them if they're just Christians in a band. So that's something I've kind of gone back and forth on. Whether I'm right or wrong, I don't know. But I think Christians in a band is probably the norm, is probably a good way to go about it. But then again, like I said, target audience. I don't know. That's what I always kind of thought about it, is the target audience. Like, what are you trying to do for it?
Yeah, and like when you're talking about your band, like being in a band, you're not going out like, hey, this is my band, we're Christians in a band. It's like, no, we're a Christian band. Like, there's going to be, in conversation, it's going to be said differently too, just depending on who you're talking to and where you're at and stuff. And then that's true as well. Like, what exactly, like where, like who is your target audience? Like if we're talking strictly metal, hardcore, extreme music, then I think my opinion, geared towards more Christians in a band. But then, yeah, if you're getting, like Dustin said, more rock styles geared towards worship, contemporary things like that, then you'll probably be leaning towards, we're a Christian band, and label it that.
Andres?
I don't know if that question's for me, to be honest, because I'm sure you guys know like the cage stage Calvinist. I'm more of a cage stage at this point. Cage stage Kierkegaardian, which makes sense because my son's name is Soren. But I think his quote that really helped, like not help, but just changed my thinking. His quote is, "There's no one that has more disdain for humanity than someone who wants to lead a crowd." And so that made a lot of sense to me. And so for me, it's like at the point that I'm at, and I hold it in open hand. It's like, who cares? Either one, they're trying to gain a following and they're trying to sway a people. And so it's like, that's kind of why I became content with just like putting music out there and not going out and like, I was just like, I don't really care about that stuff. I used to, but why? Why do I need 5,000 people screaming my name? I just don't like. That's, in a way, it is kind of holding contempt for humanity. But that's maybe that's the Chardonnay talking.
The saving a Christian band.
The saving is, all 8 of us are Christian. Yeah.
I mean, for me, I've mulled over and talked with and discussed and, the whole thing, many times. I go towards Christian band because I think I'm with Andres in the sense that I don't really care. It doesn't matter. But in the sense that, so this is a very practical thing that I've experienced, is that when people aren't willing to label themselves as a Christian band, even when they are Christians in a band, my experience is that, people don't want to be held to a certain standard. They want to be able to act a fool and do what they want and not have people say, hey, but you said you were a Christian band. Now the other side of that is, yeah, but we shouldn't be putting our faith in men anyways. So what does it matter? But as far as the Christians in a band, you could make the argument, are there Christian chefs? Are there Christian, my buddy always use the example, making boxes at the box factory. You do it all to the glory of Jesus, but like, did you make that box for God? You're like, no, you made it for the person who's going to put the crap in the box. So I lean towards Christian band because to me it creates a sense of accountability to the community. But I definitely, understand both points of view.
That makes sense. I mean, I think you're right that a lot of band members don't want to be asked, if they call themselves a Christian band, they don't want to be asked questions like, "Hey, man, aren't you married? Yeah. Why are you talking to girls like that?"
For sure.
Hey, buddy.
They don't want to be examined.
Yeah. Yeah.
So turning back towards music question for a little bit, and this is pretty open-ended, but what makes something heavy, Dustin?
Oh, there's a lot of things that can make it heavy. It could even be the lyrics or just the voice, or it could be the way the drums are played that makes it heavy. I don't know. I think there's a combination of all of those things that can create like something that's so heavy it creates an emotion. It maybe doesn't feel dark, but it just feels like there's a weight to the music. That's when I feel like something's really heavy. It's just, you have the perfect combination. It's just like, it's weighty. I don't know. I said that's what makes something heavy. Or maybe if it's 20 pounds or 30 pounds.
Oh, I'm sweating. Andre?
Ryan's like, man, I lift 200 easy every single morning.
Bump it up.
Yeah. Dude, I'd probably say 9 times out of 10 drums. Kind of it. Like, drums have just kind of become an instrument of the past. It's just, and I mean like acoustic drums. Everybody has, some form of percussion, but almost nobody likes having a legit drummer. And so, I mean, I've heard some pop songs that when they have a legit drummer on stage, it sounds powerful. It sounds beefy because you're not just using the Who knows, man? Maybe it's because a lot of us are musicians, and so we kind of appreciate the acousticality, if that's a word, and not just like throw an 808 up there. And it's like, come on, man. Anybody could do that, So yeah, probably drums. But yeah, I would say that's my answer. Drums.
I think that it's just too much. Something heavy. It's like, I'm straightforward. Like, this is heavy or not. I don't know. I think probably just. I don't know. I think just throwing in a screamer automatically makes something heavy.
Can you be heavy without a screamer?
Yeah, you could have like electronica and throwing a screamer, and it's like, this is heavy now.
Yeah.
No, yeah, you can definitely be heavy without a screamer. I mean, there's metal bands that are just all cleans and that are heavy, or go back and forth and continue to keep that heaviness going. But I don't know, it's just so much that you can throw into the pot to make something heavy. I mean, you can have slow, just beefy riffs, make something heavy, or you can just speed it up. Man, a band just doesn't use, they just don't ever really drop tune, and that makes it heavy. I mean, there's a lot of like black metal bands, this kind of shoegaze metal bands that are heavy, but they throw in a lot to make it heavy in a different kind of way, like the atmosphere, just kind of different elements thrown into the music, other than it's just typical guitar, drums, bass, vocals type stuff. So it could go anyway with me.
It depends on what you like, right? Because like I was watching a video of Protest the Hero earlier. I'm like, man, Protest the Hero was so technical that if you're watching them, you can't you don't know when to move. You're like,
oh yeah,
is this when I start watching? Like, it's just, you're constantly going to switch the time signature on me. And so it's like, it depends, man. Some people listen to Animals as Leaders and they're able to just kind of be like, yeah, I'm like, it's like a calculus lecture, man. It's pretty complicated.
Yeah, I mean, Ryan, to me, hit the nail on the head as far as like how I think about it, which is like, wait, is fast heavy or is slow heavy, right? And then you could take a pop song and throw a screamer over it, and you're like, yeah, I guess that's heavy. Like it's it is tough to say. I think distortion plays a part. I mean, you could say that rock was built on distortion and 4/4 drums, and if metal and hardcore evolutions out of that. Distortion definitely plays a role in that. Obviously it's right that the point was that the question creates a perspective, but yeah, it is tough to say. You can have all the elements, right, and still not be heavy. And it's like aggression maybe, right, because it comes from vocals, drums, guitar, all these different combinations, but you don't necessarily need all the, right? You can have all the parts and still not be heavy, but you don't necessarily need all the different pieces to
I think it's probably like as music has progressed, it's a lot harder to like say and pinpoint like a band or a song like this is heavy versus something else. Like maybe 15, 20 years ago, someone could have been like, this is what makes a heavy song, But now just you have just so much types of genres, music, and do whatever and go whatever direction. You can put whatever you want in the song. It's just like, yeah, it's a preference thing, really. Just kind of like what Andre said, like it depends on like what you like.
Yeah, I think I've been playing in bands since 2004, and I remember back then, dude, like. And obviously, like I was in South Florida, dude. The scene wasn't huge, but everyone just kind of was in their lane. There was nobody like taking influences from different parts of music and being like, let me throw that in there. Like whether you like them or not, that is what made Attack famous. Is that they were one of the very few bands. It's like, we're gonna take techno and throw it into hardcore, and we're just gonna be unapologetic about it. And whereas most people would have been like, that's lame, that's stupid, they're like, we're going to do it anyway, and we're going to tour the world, and people are going to like it because it's something different. One of my favorite bands, that my claim to fame is that my band in high school played with Folly. And I don't know if you've ever heard Folly, The Folly is a hardcore ska band. They're a hardcore ska band, and they're so heavy that every time they came down to Florida, there would be a fight. Like, there would just be a massive fight. They would tour with all these hardcore bands that were heavier than them, but when they would come on, everybody would fight because it was just like they were so divisive. You know what I mean? But now you're seeing a lot more cross-pollination, where people aren't afraid to take their outside influences, outside of hardcore, I mean, and bring them in and make, you know, something different with hardcore music. Lately, I've been listening to, for example, Oathbreaker. And Oathbreaker, man, it's a girl screamer, but she'll sing, you know, half of the song, and then they'll go into just like chaotic screaming. You can think of like Dillinger Escape Plan, right? They're one of the first bands that was like, we're just gonna jazz in the middle of the song. We're just gonna play jazz, and it's like that's what we're seeing a lot more now, because as bands are just like, let's just throw chugs and dissonant chords, and that's enough. You are like, nah, man, like throw in different stuff, throw in different influences, and that's what, you know. So who knows what it's gonna sound like in 5 to 10 years?
For sure.
You know.
Yeah, I think the most that you can say is, unfortunately for Andres, there's going to be less real drummers.
Yeah, probably.
That's probably the future.
Well, the drummers are more welcome now because the guitarists are taking up less space in the tour band, right? Yeah. Because now they just have like an Axe FX or a Helix, and they don't have to carry around a bunch of caps and stuff. So
I'll tell you what, for one of the last singles I did for This Divided World, so I have always written my own drums, and I got to a place where I was like, all right, man, I've written one too many linear fills, and I worked with a drummer, and I sent him all my MIDI, had him listen to my stuff, and there's something about that, like, guitarists don't write how drummers write. And you know, I worked with him, and he kind of like, I said, you know, leave the bones where they are, but like, you know, kind of fill in the flesh. And yeah, it's such a difference of, yeah, what a real drummer. I'm like, I just, you know, snare tom.
Well, I don't know if I've ever shared with you, but what makes the Saving unique, not better, unique, for better or for worse, is that because I'm a drummer first and I'm a guitarist second, I'm like, I have a general idea of what I want the song to sound like. I have like a riff, or like just a feel, like a key, a riff that sort of paints the whole song. And I'll just go into the studio and I'll just say, fire a click track, and I'll just start playing. I'll just start playing drums and just improvising. And then that would be my pre-production, and I would go in and just start writing guitar parts according to that, which is like very backwards.
Yeah.
You know, from what every other band does. They have riffs, and then the drums have to play according to that.
Sure.
You know, for better or for worse. There are some songs that I'm like, I forced that, and I wish I could have done a little bit better. But like, that's kind of what happens when you have a guy that's mainly a drummer write a, you know, hardcore song.
Yeah, that's cool. So we're going to kind of take it in a slightly different direction, coming back to maybe some spiritual questions. So should metal music exist in a house of worship? And the related question is, what do you think about the idea of the heavy metal church movement? Ryan?
Oh, me right off the bat. Well, I mean, the kind of the underlying question would have to be like, what is worship? So it's just really popular in, you know, our culture, and I mean, you know, young Christian culture isn't any different. To just kind of adapt the definition of worship, just however we want it to be, instead of having a rule and authority of which is Scripture, which God has given us, guide us and govern how we worship. Really, I'm not a fan of it. I don't think there's a lot of biblical precedent for it. I do got to qualify that there is more areas of worship than just like your church, than just the church building. You know, I could set up something at a local bar or outside somewhere, and we can start singing songs, and we worship, family worship at home. Yeah. So it's not just limited to just your church service, church building. But I think as we were to dive deeper into, what really is worship and how does God want us to worship, I think we would have some issues with doing it in spirit and in truth, and what does all of that mean when we're taking kind of what we kind of consume as entertainment, metal, hard music, heavy music, and then now just kind of creating that is just our means of worship. And it's really focused on our preference, what we want to do, instead of how God commands it from us. I mean, so just to keep it short.
Yeah, obviously it's a big one. There's a lot attached to 1,000 Ways to Go. Andres?
I would say just straight up no, but for the reason that, it really is, and let me elaborate, because it's going to sound offensive from what I'm saying, but it really is what's culturally relevant, right? And so, for example, like if you took what an African church does for worship and you dropped it into the middle of where I am, Delray Beach, people would be like, what is this? And nobody would be able to worship because they would just be distracted, because they're like, this is not our culture. Sure. Just like if you took, if the same church in Africa, for example, if their Baptist potluck was hamburger and mac and cheese, they'd be like, what is this? They would just be totally dumbfounded. Yeah. And so you do what is going to minimize disorder, what's going to keep the order, right? Because most churches, at least solid churches, don't want that. They want people to not be distracted. And so they're going to do what has mass appeal. Yeah. Right? They're not going to do like hip hop. Hopefully they're not going to do hip hop. They're not going to do heavy metal. They're going to do what's mainstream. They're going to do what's popular, which for better or for worse, it is a blessing and a curse. There are sometimes that I feel like the church kind of drinks that stuff too much. But they're going to do what's going to be culturally relevant, not just to the culture of their surroundings, but also to the culture of their church. Because if you have a Reformed Baptist church, it's going to sound very different than, for example, like I think, Ryan, you're Covenant Presbyterian, or I think, what is the denomination that you're at?
We're Covenant. We're small Presbyterian, so it depends. It's mostly restricted to our size, but we do more traditional a cappella, keys only. We sing the Psalms from hymn books, so it doesn't look like it. I'm not here in a suit, bow tied up or anything, but metal music. I think we would all agree, if metal music became like the really aggressive stuff we listen to, if that became mainstream, that might be concerning for the state of the world. But so no, it's just it would be like serving liver and onions to everybody at the potluck. Some people would like it, but most people would be like, dude, give me something a little bit more down the middle,
Dustin?
I definitely agree with Andre's statements and Ryan. Like, when it comes to like the heavy metal church, like I feel like it's focusing way too much on the actual music than the actual worship. For sure. And it's a distraction. Like I grew up in a Midwest Baptist, so like also like was all about the hymn. Like we only sung hymns and had piano. And I remember one time, and talking about distractions, like we were trying to do special music one Sunday, and I think someone brought in like an electric drum set just to do like the hi-hat or something, and there were a lot of people upset about that. And so I don't know, there's a lot with distraction.
Andre?
Not the hi-hat, no! No. It sounds like a rattlesnake, no!
So it can be a distraction, but then again, I think sometimes when it comes to worship, even when it comes down to hymns, like sometimes we focus too much on what we're used to. and like just the hymns and being upset if we do try to be changed a little bit differently. But I think heavy metal's a little step too far. I would agree. Might be a little bit of a crisis and anger issue. But yeah, I don't really have too much to add on top of what they both said.
For me, I agree in the sense that it is about our preference. To me, I'd rather sing whatever song it is, right, that we've sang for the 52nd week in a row, but that everyone knows, right? We're kind of I'll speak from my church's perspective. We live in a time that we have the luxury of the words being up on the screen, if your church does that, or that you can learn the songs by listening on the radio or whatever, or even to be able to have a book that has the words in it. And to me, it's more important that people know the song and the words, because to me, this is when you introduce. I think we do need to continue to introduce, right? In Revelation, it talks about a new song. There's a case to be made about the old song, and there's a case to be made about the new song. And I think I naturally go towards the old song because it's familiar and I know. The reason for me is because, right, the first level of digestion is knowing what the words are, and the second level is being able to sing them and meditate on them, right? When you're going through the melody and learning the progression, it makes it harder to actually sing it for myself, sing it with meaning. But yeah, I'd have to say that I think the idea of the heavy metal church, it's one of those things that people would sit around and say, like, oh, wouldn't it be awesome if we had like a church with a mosh pit in it and like stuff like that. But in reality, like, no, it wouldn't be, right? Because it's just everybody who looks just like you, right? Because I think that's kind of the point, is people want a safe space. They want people who look just like them. They want to be able to take their preference and their entertainment mentality and put it into a church, which is, regardless of heavy metal or not, is, I don't think, what we want. I don't think it's what we want in the church. So for me, I would say it's a no, which I think, interestingly enough, is, this is the Christian hardcore and metal community panel, and we all said no to hardcore and metal in the church.
We probably let a bunch of people down right now. So.
Right?
I think that it's interesting. To me, there's something on that thread to be pulled about the fact that we all felt in a similar way.
Christian first,
Yeah.
Hardcore and metal for all of us is like, even though it's second in the name of this panel, it's like way, 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 way low in the totem pole of what our identity is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if you really dig deep into like those movements, you see that it's kind of just people that feel like they've been outcasted, kind of black sheep, haven't been served by the church the way that they feel they should have been.
Sure.
I mean, we could take that as Christians and as the church to look into these areas of life and these cultures and these little communities that typically don't get looked at. But that's no precedent for just going ahead and creating your own kind of church and your own kind of worship kind of deal.
Yeah.
And Micah, you brought up a good point. I never thought about it this way, that when you do something like that, you're sort of creating a church of people that are intentionally look more like you, which I think in any kind of way besides doctrinally, right, is going to be a very, very slippery slope. I think doctrinally, like, even then, you also want to be careful that you're not holding too many things in a closed hand, because then you're really going to have a problem. But I never thought about it that way. That's a great point.
So, piggybacking off that, but maybe not, we'll see. The idea of Christian metal, is Christian metal just an imitation of secular metal, or is Christian music just an imitation of is it a bad imitation of what's going on in the world, Andres?
Yes. I think all of that. Like, I think in many ways,
Yes,
man.
to which one?
All of it. All of it, really. You know, I think that there are a lot of people that try to mimic what the world is doing, and they just do it in a cheap dollar store roundabout way. And I'm thinking of Showbread, that every single album was like, you can tell exactly like, oh, you guys have been listening to Nine Inch Nails, so you made a record that sounds like Nine Inch Nails. You guys have been listening to The Refused, so you made a record that sounds like The Refused. Sure. You know, like there are many bands like that, but it's like, it's a cheap knockoff. You know, does anybody hold a monopoly on any kind of music? Of course not. Like, that would be a ridiculous argument to make. But I think that in a lot of ways, like, if you look at all of Scripture, right, there are parts of Scripture that are beautiful. There are parts of Scripture that are very inspiring, that kind of prop up your self-esteem as long as your identity is hidden in Christ. But there are parts that are also pretty terrifying, you know, and we also see that in God's creation. There are very pretty animals. They're very cute little doggies, and then they're very scary Australian spiders, you know? Yeah. And so I think much like that, music is, you know, a certain chord progression evokes a certain feeling that might be happy, and a certain chord progression provokes a feeling that is terrifying. And so all of that ultimately declares who God is and declares the glory of God. He has a beautiful, magnificent, merciful side, and he also has a terrifying side that is judgment, that is terror, you know? So I think yes to all of that.
Dustin, you want to take it?
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I mean, it's sort of like, I don't know, listening to something that you enjoyed, and maybe, I guess for metal, like obviously when heavy rock was rock and roll, 60s, 70s, when that was getting started. I mean, you have Stryper that started kind of imitating the rock and roll, and they essentially took something that didn't have that much positivity in it and not much worship in it, and they changed it to glorify and worship. So I think, yeah, it's definitely imitation now. Obviously, like what Andre was saying, there's a lot of cheap knockoffs out there, but there's also a lot of bands that can do something new as well. So that's just a short little thing. But
Ryan, can Christian bands be leaders and create and be at the forefront of whatever it is, or is it always just, you know, 2 years too late catching up to what people like?
I mean, I think typically when it comes to music and, I mean, kind of anything really in culture, technology, whatever, I think usually Christians are kind of a few steps behind. I don't know why that is. I think we need to take more, be more engaged in like the public square as far as media, art, and things like that. But I think just you know, observing just the trends, I think it's usually kind of too late, which kind of is why a lot of Christian music just kind of seems like an imitation. It just isn't up to like the secular standard.
Sure.
I mean, you may have great lyrics and something else musicianly might be lacking, or the production might be lacking or something. You know, they're not backed by a big label because of who they are as individuals or whatever the reason. But yeah, I'd say traditionally, for whatever reason, you know, Christians are a little slower as far as trying to lead in this regard. So if you're talking about like contemporary music, obviously worship, they lead in that. We lead in that style of music.
Pad. The hi-hat, the rattlesnake hi-hats intro.
Well, what I will say, just to bring it to the discussion, and maybe you guys can provide further context, but like I think of a band like For Today, right? For Today has its wonkiness theologically,
Sure.
you know. Their production value, and I think you can all agree, is horrendous. Horrendous. I mean, like it was almost like they said, "Give me the Saint Anger snare for all of the albums," you know. Like everything before Breaker, I'm just like, I don't know how anybody listened to this band. Like they were just to me, I'm like they're so bad, but they somehow like got huge, toured the world while they were still preaching the gospel. Like they must have offended every single band that they played with, like every single one, and they still somehow got bigger. And you're like, I don't know, man, like God used this sort of like cheap sounding band, you know, to sort of confound the wise and the talented and all that. It's like, how are they still touring? Like I have no idea how they were still touring when they were touring with just like the gnarliest of bands. You know, like I think my friend first saw them with Bleeding Through. Like you could hardly call them friendly to Christians, you know? So I don't know. That's just that would be my 2 cents, is that sometimes God will take a cheap, just whatever band, but because ultimately it's for his glory. And he's like, it's not about them. It's about me, you know?
I think of, you know, right. Well, this is all perceptions and through social media, but I think of Brooke from Impending Doom as someone who is very much has a strong conviction and strong message on stage and is not holding back on anything and is still somehow very close, and the bands that he's toured with totally opposite point of view, but somehow they have a mutual respect. And that's something that I've seen, that I've, you know, respected and just thought, like, I admire that, and I'm thankful that the scene hasn't chewed him up and spit him out like it has so many other bands.
Yeah, I don't think that's typically like the norm. Like as far as like Andres was saying with For Today, like you do see that with like, well, for one, the Christian community doesn't have like that many big name bands. So those bands are typically going to be more involved, touring wise, things like that. So it's going to happen, but it's not typically your norm with like smaller Christian bands. But then like people like Brooke, yeah, I think just kind of like the old saying, like talent recognizes talent. Like no one's going to discriminate if you're good at what you do, and he's good at what he does. So yeah.
Dustin, did you want to add anything or comment?
I don't think so. I think they kind of nailed it.
So, kind of coming back a little bit on the music side of things, maybe just a quick one. What's a metal subgenre that maybe it's come and gone in the past 10, 15 years, or maybe it's something current that you as an individual, as a listener, you just don't get it? You're listening to it, you're like, I know people are into this, but like I can't get down. Ryan?
You might have to swing back to me on that one. I don't know.
Okay.
I listen to such a wide range of styles. I don't know if there's really one that I could just be like, oh, I can't get on this. I don't know. I'll have to think about it.
Dustin, you got one?
Well, I used to be very open to everything, but one thing I look back on that I used to enjoy, but I don't understand why I enjoy it now, is like the down-tempo trend. Like when it first came out, it was just it was just a little bit different. Like it was just heavy chugs, and like for the first year or two, I really liked it. But if I try to listen to it today or the last few years,
you're like, speed it up. Where's the fast part? Where's the fast part?
It's like it's the same thing over and over. These 50 bands all sound the same. They have nothing they're bringing to the table besides just doing dun dun dun. Like I don't know. Like I used to enjoy it, and I'm kind of embarrassed about it.
Andres, is there a subgenre that you don't get it? Not for you?
I don't know exactly what genre they are, but I know that there's a band called Bellwitch, which I'm sure you guys know. But like their album cover, their album cover is, dude, their album cover is like so intense It's amazing. And I was like, dude, I got to listen to this band. And as soon as I pulled them up on Spotify, I saw the track, the running time, and it said 19 minutes. I said, nope. I was like,
Ain't nobody got time for that.
No way, dude. I don't got time for that. I turned it on, and I was like, dude, I don't have 5 minutes to wait until the song kicks in. So, like, no. I don't understand people that, like, that once you get past, like, the 6-minute mark, bro, that's too much song, man. That's too much song. You got to give me a break, you know? So, that.
So I'll share, and then Ryan will come back to you, see if you got one. So I'll give one or two answers. So the first one is black metal, and I don't mean the genre. I think black metal's pretty cool when I listen to it, and it's something that's different. Like, it's not really for me. I don't love it, but it's kind of part of a balanced breakfast. You listen to it every now and again. The thing that's offensive to me about black metal is that they get to do, like, bottom of the barrel production, and it's part of the aesthetic. And I'm like, no, I paid thousands of dollars to go into the studio. You better pick up that production. That's not cool. That's not cool, man. Yeah. But black metal bands that I've listened to that actually put money into their production and quality recording and stuff, like, I can get down with that. But maybe it's just that it touches some inner thing that I'm like, no, you don't get to, cheap out on your recording and say that it's part of the genre's aesthetic. Like, that's not cool.
Dude, I totally agree. I think, and if he watches this, sorry, bro, but Josiah Russell, he had posted some bands that, like, these gnarly names, like Excavation or whatever their names are. And I'm like, oh, let me go look up some of these bands. And as soon as I turned it on, I was like, was this recorded on an iPhone? Do you guys have a bass player? Like, what is this? This is horrendous. Sounds worse than any local band I've ever heard in 2003. Like, we were putting stuff out back then that sounded better. But yeah, no, I agree. I agree with that. I don't get it. Like, I don't know how you could listen to that and be like, yeah, this is nice. Like, ugh.
Treble boost all the way up. Ryan, did you think of one?
Yeah, so probably like the dad rock type of metal. So like your 5-finger death punch or somebody.
Tread lightly. We got some dads here.
Oh, yeah.
No, don't insult us like that, bro. Come on now.
Well, the dad metal. I like dad rock, like Foo Fighters are kind of getting that dad rocky stage, I'm all about them. But like the dad metal, it's kind of the mainstream styles. I can't jump on that.
Yeah.
When we talk about cheap imitations, that's cheap imitation.
Yep. Avenged Sevenfold, what is kind of like.
Oh yeah. Now definitely.
Yeah.
So let me kind of bounce back around on the other side of the fence for a little bit. And this is a pretty big one, pretty heavy one. So how should Christian music listeners and Christian bands respond to Christian bands walking away from the faith? Publicly, I should say. Dustin?
That's definitely a heavy topic right there. I mean, there's been tons over the years. Everyone from just recently Gideon coming out, and then you have had bands in the past, sort of like Texas in July, and I know August Burns Red to some degree as well. It's hard to react because you want to try to keep these people accountable, but you don't know them either. So it's really hard to know what they've experienced, to know who they are. And so like the guys in Gideon, like I've never met, like I met them, but I don't know them. It really sucks that they walked away, and I can pray about it. And maybe if I were to ever meet them again, maybe I can try to be, just be a good Christian, be a good influence, and just not slam it in their face. But I see a lot of people just like immediately tell them like, oh, you're cheapskates, you're terrible people. Not terrible people, but like they just refuse to support or like just even listen to them, to their story and whatnot. So I don't know how we should react immediately, but I mean, it's sad. And I think we should be praying for them and hope that if it's not one of us that is able to connect to them, that they'll be able to connect to someone else that can lead them or can, be there.
Sure.
But it's been happening a lot over the last 6 years, I'd say, probably.
Yeah, and to come back to what I said earlier, maybe this is a twist I'll put on it, or maybe just a question if people feel like commenting. Is it the fate of every Christian metal band to be chewed up and spit out by the Christian metal scene and walk away from the faith? Ryan?
Is it the fate to be chewed up and spit out by the Christian metal scene?
Yeah, to just walk away. Is that the fate? If you stay in the game long enough, are the bands going to walk away?
I don't think so. I don't think that's the fate. But I mean, I don't know. I'd have to definitely look and dig more into kind of those two things and see what a lot of bands ended up being. I mean, I'm not too well knowledgeable on like older bands and if they're, older bands are still around and stuff. But initially, I want to say no. It seems like with what Dustin said, like the trend within the last, half a decade has been bands have they get to like their peak and then it's like, all right, we've kind of rode the Christian wave. I'm going to jump on to the secular surfboard or whatever. So
I like it.
Yeah.
Florida analogies. New York.
Came naturally.
I can't relate.
But I mean, I being positive and optimistic, I want to say no. But it's just you see it all the time. So
yeah. Do you respond? Have you responded when you see walk away?
I have responded. I mean, if you followed just the God's Love for Hardcore Facebook page since its conception, like you've seen me respond to stuff. Like I'm not afraid to screenshot things, post them, start conversations, things like that. Yeah. I don't respond negatively, and we shouldn't respond negatively. I think we should respond in a way kind of how church discipline is supposed to be. But instead of them being sent out, they willingly go out, but we want to continue to work in a way and be treating them in the way that to bring them back in. So, I mean, ultimately we want to see them be restored. And I mean, the state of their heart is not one that we should be kind of just judging ultimately on. I mean, only God knows if, they're in a state of just kind of falling away and just in a state of sin and unbelief or whatever, or doubt, and end up, God restores them later on. I mean, we don't know that. We don't know what the future holds for those people. So we want to continue to just act, gracefully, mercifully, and just lovingly, just treat them in a way that, hey, man, if we're able to have these conversations with them, just be loving to them, just kind of understand their story, like why they made decisions, what happened, and just kind of gear them more towards what, follower of Christ act like. So,
Andres?
I'd say that it should surprise us if any of them, especially those who are long-timers, remain faithful Christians. Because, I mean, if we step out of that bubble for a second, right? Let's forget music, let's forget bands, let's forget all that stuff.
Yeah.
If any of us got hired as, say, traveling salesmen, right? Where you're flying out Sunday night and you're coming home Friday night, like, there would need to be some accountability to your soul. Like your pastors would say, like, hey man, like, are you doing stuff to make sure that you're staying faithful, that you're being obedient to God's word, that you're loving your family well? Because that's a difficult life, man. That's a difficult life.
Yeah.
Add on top of that, no accountability. Add on top of that the main purpose that they're doing that is to get more people to love them.
Sure.
Right? Add on top of that lust. Add on top of that pride, and like, dude, it's just that the deck is stacked against them from the get-go. Like the nature of what they're trying to do is it's just it's a minefield. You know what I mean? And so if any of them come out of it without, I mean, like, dude, some of them might come out as faithful Christians, but they'll come out with divorce. They'll come out with affairs. Well, having, repented, but having committed affairs. Like it really is like a really, really, it's riddled with temptations. It's riddled with stuff that as Christians, I don't know if we should be so eager to like jump into that. You know what I mean? Just like you could argue for a lot of pastors, it's like, why do you become a pastor? So that you could travel the world and speak at conferences, or so you can pastor people, right? Because when your whole purpose is, I want to raise my platform, I want to make my name more known, I want to make my, my band's name more well known. Like, man, there's so many traps on the way there that it's a surprise any of them come out of the other end whole,
I would say
a lot of Kierkegaard.
Yeah. Yep.
I would say is probably the most eye-opening thing for me was Tim Lambesis, and I know this goes back a ways. The biggest reveal to me, like when I remember reading that headline, thinking,
what did he do? What did he do?
What
happened with that?
Oh.
What happened? What are you talking about?
So the singer, are you sincerely asking?
No.
Okay.
When their new album came out, I'm like, bro, that's so heavy. It makes you want to put a hit out on your ex-wife. Sorry.
Too soon? So I think the thing that I walked away from all of that with, I mean, I remember reading the headline and thinking that I was reading The Onion or something like that. Like, oh yeah, whatever. Like that's not real life, right? And if you get into all the psychology of what happens, right? It's I would argue it's that a man walks on stage and commands the attention of tens of thousands of people and yet can't have a proper relationship with his wife. And I would say that was what the root cause was, right? It's a feeling of lack of power. But what I would say is the thing that it revealed to me is when I see bands walk away from the faith, I was distraught. I was disappointed. I was confused by what that meant, right? I was a newish Christian, and I had put some of my faith in men. And what it revealed to me is, like, yeah, people can put on a great face. People make money selling Christian music. How long before that had he decided, like, yeah, this isn't for me? And you carry on the image, right? Because it's your career, it's your livelihood. And I've never, it is tough, right? Because the balance is, if someone is a believer, then we should be able to challenge them, hold them accountable as a brother in correction. But if they are not a believer and never were, right, then how can you hold them responsible for something that, you have no right to hold them responsible for, if you want to say it like that? So I don't know, but I guess what I would say is, I don't know of too many people who have, I can't think of a single example where somebody's walked away and come back and said, man, the love that the Christian community showed me was incredible. It was so much that I felt the love of Christ. So I'm not sure. It's a tough one. I think there's something to be said about just speaking brutal truth, but also thinking about being compassionate and showing grace to people.
I'm thinking of the verse that just came to mind. I had to look it up. It's not like I had it memorized, so I'm not super holy. But Proverbs 16:32, where it says, "Whoever is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he who rules his spirit than he who takes a city.
Mm.
And so it's like, yeah, these guys might be touring the world. They might be, like you said, commanding thousands of people, but can they control themselves?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like when they go home, are they faithful to their families? Are they faithful to their spouses? You know, and unfortunately, the answer to that a lot of the times is no. You know, because I think I was telling Ryan, like one of the last times that we were hanging out, dude, because him and I live 3 or 4 hours away from each other, so we've hung out a few times, our families. And I was telling him, I was like, man, I cannot imagine. Like I know the depths of my depravity. I cannot imagine touring the world, having people screaming my name, and then coming home and my wife be like, do the dishes, be like, no, not me. Not me. You don't know who I am. You know what I mean? Like that's the depth of my depravity, man. And I think a lot of those guys, like, they don't publicize that, you know, because they have a brand to keep up. But we have no idea what you know, behind closed doors their lives are really like.
Sure.
You know, a lot of them are, dude, they get married and like 6 months later they're divorced. You know what I mean? Like, you know what a 6-month divorce looks like, dude? That's not pretty. That's not pretty at all.
So let's do 2 more questions. I'm going to do one musical one, and then we'll finish with one spiritual one. And then, we'll be done. So what is one up-and-coming Christian metal band or an underrated band or just a band that you want to give a shout-out to, or band that you like? Maybe, I guess it doesn't have to be a current band, but what's a Christian metal band on the underground side of things that you want to give a shout out to, or talk about something that you like? Ryan, you got one?
Man, I'll have to like pull up iTunes or Spotify.
That's exactly what I pull up. You know that you've reached like peak dad when you're like, can I recommend a podcast?
It's hard. Like that's probably one of the things I just really dislike kind of about Christians in a band scene. It's kind of like, I feel like I'm kind of in the mindset, it's kind of like died. Like it's if not, it's been definitely on the downward spiral for like the last 6, 7, 8 years. Because I just have not seen too many young or new bands like pop up out of nowhere and just.
That's spoken like a dad right there.
Music ain't what it used to be.
It's not what it used to be. I'm not even talking about from like style or just being good at all. Just like, where are new bands?
Yeah.
At least from the kind of the Christian side of music, they're just not popping up anymore. But
yeah, I think
if you give me 1 second, I may find it. I'll have to pop up, throw my iTunes on after it buffers for a minute and see.
we'll put it in the description of the video. Everybody can recommend one underground band. So I'll take Ryan's comment and I'll make it personal for myself with a little bit of self-deprecation, which is I agree with that. And I think the reality is, bro, we're getting older, and the bands are out there, but they might not be on the platform that you and I are looking at them. Because I always try and promote and see.
Yeah, TikTok.
If I see a new Christian band, I try and, with what influence I have, if I see somebody who's doing something good song, good production, seems like they're doing it for the Lord, just give them a shout out, right? And not that I'm anybody, but just recognize what's good. And I would agree, it's either that it's dying or it's that it's happening and I'm not seeing it. It's beneath the surface.
It could be location geographically too. Like I'm in an area of the U.S. where like we don't get a lot of tours coming through. You kind of have to like detour down to Florida and then go back to where you're going.
Sure.
And it's just
Cry me a river, Ryan. Cry me.
Gosh.
Get out of here, dude. You're like barely in Florida. I'm like
barely
in Florida, dude. I'm deep in.
Aren't you in Cuba?
Yeah, basically. I'm in North Cuba, dude. Yeah.
Yeah, but no one wants to come. Bands just don't come through Florida, though, generally. Like, you might hit, like, Tallahassee or Jacksonville or something. You know, hit the border, and then, we got to turn around. Get out of here. Scoot back up. But there's just not really a scene. I mean, Christian, secular, whatever. There's just not really a scene locally or anything. So, I mean, it depends on where you're at, too. You could be in a spot where, you know, the underground scene's popping and you're going to know of more bands locally wise. But as far as the internet, I don't know. It's just harder to just get seen and get known and heard, which is, I know I'll probably get blasted. Like, don't you search music? You're supposed to be giving people new music to look to. I don't know.
Dustin, you got a band?
Yeah, so if I had to name a band, there's this band I do enjoy called Monotheist. They're like a melodic death metal sort of thing. They're on Sky Burns Black, and now they're on Prosthetic. Very good. But going back to kind of like how the scene has changed, it's definitely evolved, and we're never, like, the music constantly evolves, right? Like, the music in the 60s, like the music in the 80s, it wasn't like in the 60s. The music in the 2000s aren't going to be like the 90s. I don't think we're going to experience another wave of the Christian metalcore, like 2008 to 2012. We're not going to see that again. But it doesn't mean that something new and something different will happen. Like, there are still some bands doing stuff. Like, I know there's been some new bands, like Deathbreaker just released an album. Last year, The Drowned God on Solid State, which was kind of a cool band. But I see in the next couple years, I think there'll be another new trend that might happen, but it might not be in metal. It might be more maybe in the rap hip hop, which I feel like there's been a lot of new Christian young artists in that genre, and I don't really listen to too much of that at all. But I've been noticing a lot of new artists compared to like the rap scene, Christian rap scene in like 2008. There was like 4 artists, 5 that were well known, and now there's a lot more. So I think the younger audience has been changing genres. Like, a lot of like the punk kids now that would be like listening to metal at 18, super angry. They're listening to more of like the trap stuff, like the newer age rap and whatnot. Like, it's evolved, and I think it's going to keep evolving. But I don't think it will ever die. But it's never gonna be at the same capacity it was with.
Is Dustin frozen on you guys?
Yeah.
Right.
Dustin, what happened, bro? You got to pay your internet bill.
All right, Andres, why don't you take it over, and we'll see if Dustin comes back.
The whole Face Down Solid State 2010. All right, am I back?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm back. Okay,
Good.
sorry. Cut off.
It's not a good Zoom meeting unless you have one technological.
No, you have to have one bad issue.
Yeah.
I'm gonna blame my new apartment. We have satellite internet, and it is a little rough.
Nice.
Anyways, I don't know where I cut off on, but I don't think
Face Down Solid State 2011, I think is the last thing I heard.
Yeah, so it will never be at the same capacity, but I don't think it'll ever die either. It's just going to look different in the future. But back to the original question, Monotheist, check them out.
Andres, you got a band or a band you want to give a shout out to, even if it's not a current band?
Yeah. Man, I'm so sleep deprived that I talked about this band a couple minutes ago and I already forgot about them, but Oathbreaker, they're really cool. Portrayal of Guilt as well. I actually have like two main places that I go to when I want to find something new, something fresh for my ears, and that would be Audio Tree, or I go to Death Wish. I don't know if you guys know the lead singer of Converge started his own label, Death Wish. I just go and I look at either they have a playlist on Spotify and I just play that and I just see what's new and what I like, or I go on their website and I see what bands they've signed that are new, that are cool. That's actually how I found out about Code Orange. way before Iron King, you know, because Code Orange was a Death Wish band. So yeah, Audio Tree, or really, I mean, I'm just kind of like, I'm shouting out sources to like find new music, Audio Tree or Death Wish, but Portrayal of Guilt is like a super fast, like Austin metal band. They're cool. And Shadow of Intent, I've been listening to them a lot, which is like super brutal but technical. I think they're really cool. Like they're like a more guttural Born of Osiris, if you can think of it that way, with less techno. But yeah, that's my reco.
So if there's a band I come across that I like, I usually shout it out on my page. There was a couple in the past months. One was Diamonds to Dust. I think they're actually from New York, not too far from me, and I like what they were doing. And then there was another band, I'll just say on my radar, which was Cardiac Rupture. But like I said, we'll Ryan, I'll give you a chance for redemption in the description of the video. We'll link it to your page. You can.
Well, I could say something. It's not like I mean, if you've been following like Brooke Reeves like on Instagram, he's started up like this death trap type stuff.
Yeah.
Where it's just like he's got like these just heavy hip hop beats.
Sure.
And he's just got some like kind of slow deathcore vocals on top of them. I've been digging it lately, so I mean that's something new. I mean that's definitely new. It's definitely trendy. So
that's the Man of God thing.
Edgy, man of OV God. So he's kind of like throwing it back to like MySpace letterings and stuff. It's like, but that's pretty cool. I've been in kind of like a chill rock kind of phase right now. So I've been listening to it's a lot of like 100th. They're one of my favorite bands anyways, kind of like right now with the last few years I'm switching over to like a more indie rock style shoegaze stuff. A lot of kind of English influence. Stephen Christian from Anne Berlin released a new Anchor and Burial album. So I've been digging that. So those are some new things I've actually been on. Dens, I really like Dens. They're on Face Down. They released a new record not too long ago. It's more rock. It's not hardcore or anything, but they got some guest vocals on there. But yeah, so yeah, I throw out some bands.
Nice. All right, so we'll leave off with one question, and then we'll kind of do if anybody wants to say anything, share anything, mention anything, a thought that popped back in their head. We'll give a chance for final words. So I'll start off with Dustin before the internet kicks out.
Appreciate it.
What is the role of a Christian metal or hardcore band?
What is the role of a Christian or metal hardcore band?
To the scene, to the church, to individuals.
I think it's
open-ended.
Oh boy. Well, I know I mentioned it before, like what's, as a band, like I feel like there needs to be some sort of goal, whether it's just to like have fun and just play some music, or if you're leaving yourself and going as a Christian band, one would make the assumption that they're going out to reach the fallen or to reach those who have not heard of Christ. And so I feel like they're a role, if they're a Christian hardcore metal band, I don't think there's a hard role, but I think one is to represent the Christian community and to be to show mercy and to show love to others that normally wouldn't receive it from the Christian community. I think that's something really important, because when you do put yourself with that label, like you do have that accountability that you need to hold. And if you're just kind of start bad mouthing and have an open mouth, sort of like the front man of Trap, like you're gonna be in kind of a hole. So I think it's a lot of it's represent the Christianity, the Christ, and the church. I think that's something that needs to be filled.
Andres, on piggybacking off that yawn, What is the role of a Christian hardcore or metal band?
That's a triple kid yawn, bro.
I'm not there yet.
Dude, it's all a blur, you know? They're like, how's life? I'm like, I just want to know what day of the week it is. Man, I don't know, because I think that maybe this will change as technology changes, and maybe even in a post-COVID world, this will change. But being in a band is so tied to touring, being constantly out on the road, being constantly away from your family, that it's just not a good position for anybody to be in, Christian or not. And so I think it's very, very hard for a Christian, a true Christian who has a passion for the Lord, to be in that setting, if they're not treating it like truly like an evangelism platform. And even then, I think we can argue, man, that it's not healthy. Like, even if someone's 20, 21 years old that has a true zeal for the Lord, that the Spirit lives in them, like, be discipled for a while, man. Stay home, like, learn how to keep a job, like, learn the basic disciplines of life. I mean, like, Paul, for example, his ministry was confirmed not only by, I believe, James and John, but also, like, he stayed home for a number of years. Then he made tents. And he just, like, attended his local church for a number of years before he went out and, you know, started spreading the gospel all over Asia Minor and whatever. But I think that we've kind of, like, idolized this sort of, yes, go and travel the world for Jesus, and not realizing how that it does chip away at our souls, man. It chips away at our souls, and it puffs us up in pride. And it's very difficult for any Christian to live through that and maintain their witness, you know? So I don't know. Honestly, that's all that to say. I don't know.
Ryan, what's the role of a Christian hardcore or metal band?
Yeah, I'm going to start with the baseline that they can sustain being a band. And there's just, I don't know if there's a role. If I had to just come out with an answer, I'd say just be a good witness. But before even Andre started talking, I was going to kind of hit the same things. I mean, it depends on if, like, you know, you have the members of the bands that are married. Like, are they going to be good witnesses to what a good husband is out on the road? Are they able to provide for their family by being in a band? But as far as just strictly band members speaking as a collection, and, you know, in regards to their music and all that type of stuff, you got to be a positive witness, and not just the way that you think you should be or how you want it to be, but a good, solid, you know, defender of Christ. So I would kind of sidebar off. It'd be kind of like an apologetic kind of field, I guess, because I mean, you're out touring, you're out in the secular space. You're even if you are a Christian band, it's not gonna be for long before you step out of kind of that little clique, and you're gonna have to defend, you know, the hope that's within you. I mean, you're gonna have to do it in a way that you're not gonna cower in the corner. You're gonna have to know what you're talking about, and be able to just show Christ to people and talk about who he is and what he's done. So, but as far as a role, I'm not sure if there is strictly one other than just being just like in any other job, you know, working for the glory of God and being a solid witness.
So for me, when I think, you know, I think about the idea of the role of the church in a similar sense, right? Because there's a lot of discussion about that. But I actually, when I started This Divided World, you know, coming back to an earlier question, This Divided World was always intended to be a cheap imitation of Suicide Silence. No, but
they're a cheap imitation now, so a cheap imitation.
No, I don't do any of that new stuff. No, but I say that jokingly, but in all sincerity, you know, when I became a believer, I was I surveyed the Christian metal music scene and I was disappointed. I said, there are not the kind of bands that I want to listen to. Okay, I will go and make the kind of band I want to listen to. And, while I don't actually, listen to my band's music, that was the intention of this Divided World. And, I was just trying to be like stupid heavy as heavy as I could be. And so to me, my role was giving an alternative to someone who wanted to listen to that kind of music, and have it come from a different place. Now, when I started This Divided World, I thought the only legitimate reason to start a Christian metal band was to evangelize, which there was something in me that was like, I don't think that's why it felt like I had to say to people, well, like, oh yeah, and it's for the lost. But I actually came to a place where I'm like, I don't think it is. Not for me. They may be, on the fringes of what I do, but I focus my music, and the purpose of it and the intention was to create an alternative and an outlet for believers. Of course it's going to reach unbelievers, but for me, my role has been to create something heavy, right? There's heavier bands, blah, 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 but create something that I perceived as being heavy for the Christian metal community to enjoy and listen to. So for me, it's never really been about explicitly mission number one, preaching the gospel. It has been about strengthening the believer and giving them an alternative. So, I don't know what each different band has a role, or they don't. But for me, it was always, that was kind of one I appreciated and respected bands that was mission number one. But I just kind of was like, yeah, I don't think that's my gig as much. So I'm going to come back through and everybody gets their last word or their final thing or whatever they wanted to say. So, Andres, any final words, any final thoughts, anything you wanted to share?
We just had a curfew installed in my county, so no. I don't know, man. I think 2020 has overstayed its welcome, and it's aside from all this, like, I think it's just a really heavy season. I think that we all need to be praying for multiple things, man. Our world is in upheaval right now, and we just have to remember that in the darkest times, the light of Christ will shine the brightest, and we just need to be alert, we need to be faithful, and we need to show people that there's something different about us. When the whole world wants to blow itself up, there's something different about us.
Yeah. Dustin, any last words, final thoughts, closing things, anything that, I remember now. I was going to say that, but I forgot.
Can I actually finish saying something real quick, though? In this divided world, the saving power of Christ is still possible for everybody.
Yeah, for sure.
I think he got it. I don't think Micah got it.
I got the puns all the way.
No.
I'm a little late, but I'm worth waiting for.
Okay.
Gotta step the dad game up.
If that was an invitation to a collaboration, I'm down.
Right.
Dustin, my friend, any final words?
Not too many final words. 2020 is definitely going to be a year to remember, but also for us to want to forget as well. But
sure.
Yeah, it's keeping the prayer up, it's having to put trust in the Lord, and we need to do that this year. And so hopefully on the music side of it. Hopefully we'll get some more new exciting stuff as well. And thank you for setting this up. This is neat to have a conversation together. So hopefully it's reached people who would appreciate it, and who knows, maybe we'll do this again sometime.
Yeah. Ryan, last words, final thoughts?
No, this was definitely fun. Yeah, no real final thoughts as far as the conversation or anything. But yeah, definitely just hope people just stay faithful out there. You know, it's a season of prayer. So if anything, 2020, God was just showing us that, hey, we need to pray more. We need to depend on Him more. You know, just don't be persuaded by every wind of doctrine that's out there, especially now with everything going on as far as in the streets. So you're gonna get a lot of people just kind of pushing people around, bullying people around. So Christian, just stay strong, stay faithful. You know, stay resting and dependent on the Lord Jesus Christ. So
Yeah. Well, everyone, if you've watched the video this far, you've made it through the gauntlet. Thank you for listening, for watching. Like we said initially, we hope this creates a sense of community. So if you like this video, make sure to reach out to all these guys on their individual channels or pages, and I'll link them in the description. And we'll see you guys soon.